Kill him now. The words that Anakin has secretly been thinking since the very beginning of the Clone Wars. He argues with himself as he stares down at Dooku's helpless expression while holding the two lightsabers crossed in front of his throat, poised for execution. But how did Anakin get here? How exactly did the veteran saber master Count Dooku get bested at his own art by the very Jedi Knight that he had once dismembered? Welcome, curious scholars of the galaxy, to today's video, where we will be breaking down the climactic face-off aboard the Invisible Hand, where the Sith Lord Darth Tyrannus met his fate at the hands of the Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker. In order to fully understand the events of the duel, first we must break down the individual fighting styles and capabilities of Anakin and Dooku respectively. Beginning with Count Dooku, let's analyze the first what he was most known for his lightsaber combat specifically. Dooku was a dueling prodigy during his early training years at the Jedi Temple. He was naturally gifted in the Force, but spent most, if not all of his time honing his skills with blade-to-blade combat, sparring and practicing for hours on end with the Temple's training bots. Unlike most Jedi, Dooku decided to exclusively specialize in Form 2 lightsaber combat known as Makashi. Makashi was a lightsaber combat form that was specifically tailored for blade-to-blade combat. It was developed during the very early days of the Jedi Order, while it was still in its infancy concerning the blade. In the days of the Ancient Order, there was only one other version of lightsaber combat known as Shi-Cho in practice, which was very basic and involved wide sweeping movements with the blade. When the Great Jedi Schism happened, there was a split in the Jedi Order, where the newly found Dark Jedi ceded and began a war. During this era, a new lightsaber form was founded to combat their saber-wielding opponent, something that had been exceptionally rare in the prior days of the Order. Now though, they had an enemy that used lightsabers themselves, and therefore, a new lightsaber variant began. Form 2 is very akin to our world's fencing, focusing on lateral movement, precise and graceful blade work, as well as being proficient in taking down single opponents. The form was weakest when facing multiple opponents or against blaster fire. However, this did not outright spell the end for a Makashi master, as a true master of this form would perfect the ability to isolate one's opponents, as we see Dooku do many times with Anakin and Obi-Wan, though this form also lacked the ability to gain momentum during a fight, which makes it weaker to more aggressive fighting styles and variants of lightsaber combat. Still though, in a one-on-one duel, it was nigh insurmountable. Dooku would hone his combat abilities until the point where he was deemed the greatest swordsman of the Jedi Order, even the greatest swordsman of his time. During his time as a Padawan, he was able to pass 2 Jedi Masters in single combat, an event that was exceedingly rare, striking them down and having to be forced to stop. The reason being, he had reason to believe that they were using the dark side, and Dooku wanted an excuse to prove his dominance and destroy them. Following this event, many of the Jedi Masters feared the young Dooku, many except one, Grandmaster Yoda himself. It was practically unheard of for a council member, much less the Jedi Grand Master, to take on a Padawan. This was big news at the time. Yoda would go on to teach Dooku in the ways of the Force, and his powers grew immensely, with Dooku seeing something special in the young boy. It could be said that before Anakin, Dooku was the Anakin of his era. After Dooku left the Jedi Order and embraced the ways of the dark side, his powers skyrocketed to unprecedented levels, so much so in fact that Sidious felt threatened by his very presence. Dooku was not only a master at the blade and adept at the Force, but he was also an expert at the psychological warfare side of blade-to-blade combat, still known as Dun Mak. Dun Mak was a form of combat that focused on instilling distraction and doubt in your opponent, usually by way of insults and belittling. We have seen this succeed multiple times against Obi-Wan, and even Skywalker during their duels in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. During their final duel, Dooku would try this on Anakin and goad him into dipping into the dark side, something that he was unfortunately successful at. Dooku is quite possibly the definitive swordsman of his era. It was said that the only individual that was his equal at the beginning of the Clone Wars was Grandmaster Yoda, and at the end, the only two that stood as his equal were Mace Windu as well as Yoda. Dooku is still considered by many to be the greatest outright swordsman in all of Star Wars, and many believe that he may have weakened at the time in Revenge of the Sith, as the novelization for Revenge of the Sith confirming that Dooku is far from his prime, even explaining that he is tired by the time he is killed by Anakin. Now that we have established Count Dooku, let's move on to Anakin. Anakin Skywalker was a renowned duelist in his own right, with a couple of victories under his belt against Asajj Ventress. Anakin was also a clever and renowned battlefield tactician, despite some of his impulsive tendencies. He led the 501st to many victories during the war, and at a time of Revenge of the Sith, he had widely been regarded by the public as the hero of the Clone Wars and the poster child for the Jedi Order, thanks in part due to the publicity that was orchestrated by Palpatine. Anakin Skywalker was a practitioner of Form 5 lightsaber combat Djem So, and its variant Shien. Form 5 was created by practitioners of Form 3. Form 3 Surisu was solely focused on defense and energy preservation, choosing to outlast an attacker and striking only when an opponent rises in a fatigued state, waiting for the opportune moment. Form 5 practitioners sought to correct the weaknesses seemingly seen in Surisu's sole focus on defense by creating more offense in the way of combat. Djem So was the direct opposite, with its entirety revolving around an overwhelming offense, with its defense mainly consisting of counterattacks, going along with the statement that a best defense is a good offense. Djem So is so aggressive in fact that it is the most physically demanding of all 7 lightsaber forms, even more so than that of a Taru, based on Djem So's emphasis on power strikes. With the Taru you just had to be quick, but with the Djem So you had to be quick and strong. Practitioners of Form 5 are usually those of taller stature, with more emphasis on using their muscle mass aided by the Force. But of course, dueling style isn't everything, as Dooku was able to best Anakin on many of their encounters. Anakin may have had Dooku backpedaling for the majority of the fight, but it seemed as though Dooku was more still in control of the duels. It is worth noting that Sidious had told Dooku to take it easy on Anakin, as he wanted to test Skywalker's limits and then see the Chosen One's power for himself. In all of their duels, Dooku is in fact testing and in a strange way teaching Anakin Skywalker. As in every single duel Anakin had with Dooku, he grew in power despite losing all but one. After taking Kenobi out of the picture, Anakin's anger was slowly beginning to be unleashed on the Invisible Hand. The Count would go on to say, "I sense great fear in you, Skywalker. You have hate, you have anger, but you don't use them." With the Sith Lord poking and prodding, pushing all of Anakin's buttons, finally, the young Jedi Knight gave in to the allure of the dark side, for even just a moment. He unleashed his fury on Darth Tyrannus, and Dooku was unprepared for the well of power within the young boy. Dooku was forced into a position that he did not want to be in the defense, no longer taking it easy and finding himself in a fight for his life. Anakin, though, had gone into a calculated rage, battering his opponent's defenses away with measured ferocity. As we mentioned before, Makashi has a hard time generating momentum, which happens to be something that Djem So is very good at, meaning that the two lightsaber styles do not actually match up, and though on the surface you would say that Makashi would have the advantage here, the second a practitioner of Djem So gains this momentum, the fight is over. Anakin calculatedly beat down the Count's wall of defense before finally taking advantage of the opening and exacting his revenge by taking double of what the Count had once taken from him, his hands. And now, here we are again, Dooku on his knees at the mercy of the budding Vader, with Palpatine praising him from the side and urging for the Sith Lord's execution. Anakin at this point still believes in the virtues of the Republic and the Jedi way, so he doubts himself for a moment. Palpatine, however, sensed how much he desired to take revenge for what Dooku had done to him and all the horrors that Tyrannus had turned loose on the galaxy during the war. So, all it took was 2 simple yet effective words: do it. And with that, Count Dooku was no more. The whole plan of Palpatine being kidnapped was also that he could lure Anakin there so that he could see his true power in person. It was also an underhanded attempt to get rid of Dooku, because as stated before, Sidious was threatened by him and his rising power. He needed a quick way to dispose of him so that he could make room for his new and more powerful apprentice. So my friends, what do you think of this explanation? What do you think might have happened if Dooku had bested Anakin once again in front of the Chancellor? Comment down below if you would like to see more information on the various lightsaber forms and analyze various other duels. Now my friends, go forth, may the Force be with you, and I hope you have a great day.